Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Our coverage of Legacy of Destruction continues, this time looking at some Legacy support, and it's built around a mechanic that people have had some opinions about in the past. In recent memory, one of the strongest decks in the game, Tearlaments, harnesses the power of mill, taking cards from your deck and dumping them directly into your grave. Now, if you're not super familiar with card games in general, you might think that's a bad thing. I mean, you want to use your cards before they get trashed, right? But many cards in the game benefit from this. They either have effects when they get in there, have effects while they're in there, other cards can utilize them to gain advantage, or cash them out altogether. And if you think that's a new development, then dear oh dear do I have some news for you. Premiering in the May 2008 core set, Light of Destruction, it's almost like our pack names are telling us something, Lightsworn are a group of holy warriors who travel the length and breadth of time and space, answering the prayers of those in need and picking up new worthy soldiers along the way, which explains why their ranks are so diverse. But to do so, they require a vast amount of magic, which is represented by their shared effect, milling from your deck. But like with most things in this game, what may appear to be drawbacks can actually be enablers. And between several core sets, a dedicated structure deck, and a controversial prize card, there's almost too many of these for one duelist to keep track of. But thankfully, I'm here to help. We'll bask in the glory of our cadre of crusaders, learn the ways of their holy order, then see what other worlds we can visit to recruit more forces from. It's time to light the way, or perhaps darken your doorstep, with Lightsworn Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. So what's the deal with Lightsworns? Well, they're a series of light monsters who, in general, have an effect that mills some static amount of cards from your deck during your end phase, or as part of another effect, with the number of other effects increasing in power the more Lightsworns you have in grave. But that's not the whole story, because there's actually a power that they draw upon when the light is not enough. The Twilightsworns are dark monsters that are alternate versions of some of our old guard. So we'll start by covering the light monsters first, move on to their shadowy counterparts, then move on to the extra deck as normal. Rinian, Lightsworn Rogue, is a level 2 beast flip monster with 100 attack and defense, and its flip effect targets a Lightsworn monster in your grave, shuffles that target into the deck, then draws you a card. The idea here is that, especially early on, Lightsworns were at risk at decking themselves out, so Rinian could help to alleviate that, except it keeps your deck at the same size because of that draw. Yeah, well, it could be more like a Skalangle to get you a slow card draw. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you, I have no clue why this card exists mechanically, but no one really used it, so who cares? The important part is that it looks like a shiny, adorable Displacer Beast kitten. Ryko, Lightsworn Hunter, is a level 2 beast flip monster with 200 attack and 100 defense, and its flip effect resolves these following effects simultaneously. You destroy a card on the field, and send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave. Now, this may sound like a fancy man-eater bug, but trust me, this is much more. It's not mandatory, so it won't pop itself by accident. It can hit back row, not just monsters, and it doesn't target. Not to mention that it has the whole mill 3 thing. This actually saw widespread play, not just in Lightsworn, because even in a deck that didn't benefit from it, milling 3 is such a small price to pay for unconditional removal that's hard to pass up. But if you're playing in older formats, make sure to check your card text. Ryko has had a number of erratas over the years, changing between the effects resolving simultaneously or sequentially, which can matter if the cards you remove can miss timing. It's a bit of extra work, but if you want to play it, you're just gonna have to hunt them down. Arcus, Lightsworn Druid, is a level 3 beast warrior with 1200 attack and 1800 defense. While on the field, neither player can target Lightsworn monsters anywhere with card effects, and it mills 2 during your end phase. Now, the beast warrior thing makes a bit more sense when you factor in the druid part, so long as your denomination of druid can wild shape. But the interesting text is the anywhere. There's not a single other card in the game with that same text, basically giving targeting protection to anything in a public zone. And by any, I mean all, including your opponents. That's right, this card does not differentiate between owners, so if you're in the mirror match, this applies to all of them as well. But it also doesn't preclude anyone from that protection, since it says neither player. So while your monsters can't be targeted by your opponent, you also can't use any targeted cards to affect your Lightsworn monsters in your graveyard, which does come up considering the amount of recursion we have access to. It's a strange double-edged sword that has to be used carefully, but with Link Summoning, you can turn off that anywhere, anytime. Lumina, Lightsworn Summoner, is a level 3 spellcaster monster with 1000 attack and defense, and once per turn, you can discard a card, then target a level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster in your grave and special summon that target. Lumina also mills you 3 during your end phase. This is one of our most powerful monsters, helping to mobilize our creatures not just from the grave, but from the hand as well. A little trick is that if you have a valid target in your grave but want to summon a monster from your hand, you discard that monster's cost because you pay those before picking targets. And wouldn't you know it, that monster you discarded looks like a pretty valid target to me. Another funny thing about Lumina is that the effect doesn't exclude itself, which means you can use Lumina to summon another Lumina, use the soft once per turn to summon another Lumina, and now you have 3 Luminas. This gives you pretty great material for a number of summons, not to mention you'll be milling a lot of cards during the end phase. Also, anyone care to explain to me why her gestures have the dark magic circles around them? Is it time for another multiversal diatribe? Minerva, Lightsworn Maiden, is a level 3 spellcaster tuner monster with 800 attack and 200 defense, and when this card is normal summoned, you can add a light dragon monster from your deck to your hand, whose level is less than or equal to the total number of Lightsworn monsters with different names in your grave. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the grave, send the top card of your deck to the grave, and during each of your end phases, send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave. Minerva's primary role is as a mill extender, giving us more of them if we mill them, helping us to hit our key cards and thin our deck. On the off chance that Minerva lands in our hand, it's a good mid-game monster because of that search. We have some great light dragons to search on theme. The problem is that they have fairly high levels, so we do need to have a stocked up graveyard for this to work. But because it's generic, there are some more reasonably sized ones that we can grab. And on top of that, it is a tuner, giving you access to your superb synchro summons. Also, great attention to detail, Minerva even has a falconry glove for handling the owl. They truly are a goddess of wisdom. Shire, Lightsworn Spirit, is a level 3 fairy monster with 400 attack and 1400 defense, and gains 300 attack for each Lightsworn monster in your grave with a different name. And during each of your end phases, you send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave. On the surface, Shire is the quintessential Lightsworn monster. It gets stronger the more you have in the grave, with the mill potentially boosting us even further. In practice, this is a wash. Like, it takes 5 names in grave just to get this to 1900. And just to give you an idea, some of our best effects from other cards unlock at 4. 10 names does get this to a whopping 3400, but that's a quarter of your deck dedicated to singletons, and not every Lightsworn is worth playing. Fun fact though, up until I started making this video, I thought this card was called Shire Lightsworn Sprite, cause, you know, it's a fairy. Look, I was in high school, I was too busy trying to resolve Geyseris, cut me some slack here. Dragon of Lightsworn is a level 4 dragon monster with 1500 attack and 1300 defense, and if you have a Lightsworn monster in your grave, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is special summoned, you can send a Lightsworn card from your deck to the grave except a copy of this card, and if this card is sent to the grave, you can add a dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2600 defense from your deck to your hand. That is a very specific stat block, you'll want to keep that in mind. As for the rest of the card, it's all value. Just get one on-theme card into the grave, and you get a free body that puts any Lightsworn into the grave. And we've got one in particular that'll get us to a level 8 synchro, which in turn will trigger our search when this goes to grave for that summon. This is one of our latest monsters, and it certainly shows, doing absolutely everything we want to help us get into a winning position. It's even a manageable monster to search off of Minerva, for crying out loud. But really, what theme isn't improved by adding a baby version of our boss dragon? Aaron, Lightsworn Monk, is a level 4 warrior monster with 1600 attack and 1000 defense, and if this card attacks a defense position monster before damage calculation, shuffle that monster into the deck, and you mill 3 cards during the end of your turn. Aaron serves a very specific purpose, but for the time, an important one. Spirit Reaper was a popular monster back in the day, which Aaron swept up handily without having to use any expendable resources. It also played well against floating monsters like Mystic Sarcastic Tomato, since they would generally be set in defense position so your opponent could avoid some damage. The effect hasn't really translated well to the modern era. There's even a monster type that specifically it doesn't work with, but had a solid run at its peak, and easily has the most dynamic posing of any Lightsworn monster. You could say it looks absolutely stunning. Fellis, Lightsworn Archer, is a level 4 Beast Warrior tuner monster with 1100 attack and 2000 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by a card effect. If this card is sent from the deck to the grave by a monster effect, special summon it, and you contribute this card, then target a monster your opponent controls, destroy that target, then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave. This is another monster that would see a lot of play in a lot of decks, and for good reason. If you peeled this off the top of your deck with any monster effect, you got a free level 4 tuner that could help you make a synchro, or get traded in for some proactive removal. And any deck outside the theme that liked the grave was already running Mathematician, which was the perfect level 3 non-tuner to pair with Fellis to act as a wealth of level 7 synchros. Nowadays, with Dragon of Lightsworn, level 8s are on the table too. It's pretty clunky if you hard draw it, owing to a design that originated from another card we'll talk about later, but is nonetheless a potent ally that never fails to hit the mark. Garroth, Lightsworn Warrior, is a level 4 warrior monster with 1850 attack and 1300 defense, and each time any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave by the effect of a Lightsworn monster you control, except copies of this card, send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave, then draw a card for each Lightsworn monster sent to the grave by this effect. That's right, Garroth doesn't mill by itself, it's a mill multiplier, pinging off of every other Lightsworn you have. This can churn through your deck something fierce, to say nothing of the draws you could potentially get off of it. It's not a monster you necessarily want to see often, especially as milling gets more and more efficient, but when this goes off, it's the perfect symphony of card backs snapping against the table as you fill your grave with delicious, potent cards. And look, they were even nice enough to let them keep the ab window. Garroth truly is the gift that keeps on milling. Jane, Lightsworn Paladin, is a level 4 warrior monster with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, and if this card attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 300 attack during the damage step only, and Jane mills you 2 cards during the end phase. This is one of those gains attack when attacking monsters from back in the day, and this is one of the ones that doesn't get a decrease when being attacked, thank God. This incentivizes you to be as aggressive as possible, which lines up with how you need to win as soon as possible since you're racing against your own dwindling deck. Aside from that though, there's not much to share. It hits the battlefield and hits hard. Pretty basic, kinda like Paladins themselves. God, I am getting so much mileage out of tabletop RPG class jokes in this video. Every day we inch closer to me running that Yu-Gi-Oh themed tabletop session. Genis, Lightsworn Mender, is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 300 attack and 2100 defense, and during the end phase, if any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave by the effect of a Lightsworn card this turn, burn your opponent for 500 damage, and if you do, gain 500 life points. Now, unlike Garroth, who will trigger anytime a Lightsworn mills, this doesn't check every time. Rather, it looks to see if a mill happened during that turn, then resolves once during the end phase. This means you could have one other Lightsworn or 4, it doesn't really matter, you're only ever going to drain for 500 a turn. Granted, this can trigger during either player's end phase, so if you have a Lightsworn card that can mill during your opponent's turn, you can get that trigger then, but that's not really going to accelerate it to a meaningful speed. And when it comes to battlefield triage, urgency is paramount. Some cleric they turned out to be. Lila, Lightsworn Sorceress, is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 1700 attack and 200 defense that can target a spell or trap card your opponent controls, change its battle position from face-up attack to face-up defense, destroy that target, and this card's battle position cannot be changed until the end of your next turn. And this card mills you 3 during the end phase. That's right, we've got in Archetype spell and trap removal, how about that? The position change is rough, especially with that defense, but if you sync with it right after, it'll hardly mean anything. It's a very useful card to have on hand. You never know when you'll need someone to cast a clutch Dispel Magic. Or trap card. Raiden, Hand of the Lightsworn, is a level 4 warrior tuner monster with 1700 attack and 1000 defense, and during your main phase, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave. Then if any Lightsworn monsters were sent to the grave by this effect, this card gains 200 attack until the end of the opponent's turn, and once per turn, during your end phase, you mill 2 as well. This is another popular card that could find a home in a lot of decks. Level 4 warrior tuners are in high demand, especially because you can find them with Rhoda, and a milling effect that doesn't require you to wait until the end phase phase meant you could utilize any value from it immediately. Grave-centric decks were clamoring for this kind of card, which would end up selling the Lightsworn structure deck to anyone with a pulse. Heck, if you're a zombie player, even people without a pulse. This is a stellar card, from the effect to the stats to the synchros it can offer. But it's strange that it's not a thunder monster, right? You know, for the monster named Raiden. Weiss, Lightsworn Archfiend, is a level 4 Fiend Tuner monster with 0 attack and 1700 defense, and you can place one other Lightsworn card from your hand on top of your deck to special summon this card from your hand, then send the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave. And if this card is sent from the deck to the grave, you can target a Lightsworn monster in your grave and special summon it. See? Never doubt that the Dark Worlds are good guys. They looked after Raiko while they were hanging around their dimension, and now Snow is following it around to keep an eye on it. The effect is great, effectively taking dead copies of Fellas and a monster we'll name shortly, and actually summoning them. And as a tuner, it makes for a great start to other bigger things. And of course, getting back a free Lightsworn from the grave isn't bad, extending your plays far beyond what they otherwise could have been. We're getting dangerously close to another card game with that name though. If I see any crossover anime characters, I'm heading out. Wolf, Lightsworn Beast, is a level 4 Beast Warrior monster with 2100 attack and 300 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by a card effect. And if this card is sent from the deck to the grave, you special summon it. This is the monster Fellas was based after, and was a big part in the Lightsworn strategy, being a huge payoff for your mills, recruiting a monster that can stand toe-to-toe with Cyber Dragon itself. And unlike Fellas, this triggers if sent from the deck to the grave using any method. So, you know, have fun with it. Beyond that though, there isn't much to say. This makes your board bigger and stronger, and if you hit more than one during your milling chain, there's nothing else like it. It's pretty bricky at a full 3 copies, but come on, it needs its friends. You wouldn't want it to be a lone wolf, would you? Celestia, Lightsworn Angel, is a level 5 fairy monster with 2300 attack and 200 defense, and when you tribute summon this card by attributing a Lightsworn monster, you can send the top 4 cards of your deck to the grave, then target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy those targets. It's basically our own on-theme monarch, cracking 2 cards and providing a sizable body in the process. That being said, it can be a huge risk. Summon negation hits this card hard, and if the cards you want to hit are chainable removal, it's basically the same thing. Not to mention that a deck with tribute summoning that isn't built for it is not suitable for more modern environments. Which feels wrong to say considering how aggressive this card actually is. Forget Guardian Angel, we've skipped right to the avenging part. Gorgoneth Lightsworn Dragon is a level 6 dragon monster with 2000 attack and 1600 defense that gains 300 attack and defense for each Lightsworn with a different name in your grave. It deals piercing battle damage and mills you for 3 during each of your end phases. That's right, it's got the Shire text, but this time attached to a body that actually means something. By the time you summon it, its attack is going to be hovering around the 3k mark, and is particularly well suited to keeping the pressure on against opponents hiding behind defense position monsters, especially those indestructible ones. Sadly, we have the same tribute problem as Celestia, and this doesn't even have the same immediate impact on summon. But the tribute isn't necessary like it is with Celestia, so if you have a way to cheat this into play, you've got a monster that can grow to monstrous heights and close out games, honestly by itself. But I could just be overly sentimental. I mean, a big dragon with feathery wings, long golden locks, and red horns. If I didn't know any better, I'd say this is Mariamne. Especially because if I dwell too much on it, I'll go into another lore overload. Judgment Dragon is a level 8 dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2600 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from the hand by having 4 or more Lightsworn monsters with different names in your grave. You can pay 1000 life points to destroy all other cards on the field, and during your end phase, send the top 4 cards of your deck to the grave. This was the big payoff for the deck, a Blue Eyes sized threat that could clear the board, leaving only itself and any follow-up plays you had. And if you were possessed of enough gas, that would end the game on the spot, especially during the terrifying age of Ignition Effect Priority, where the turn player would get a chance to activate their Ignition Effect during their summon window. That means even an interaction like Bottomless Trap Hole or Raigeki Break couldn't stop this if they decided to use it immediately. But even now, that is still one heck of an effect that can take over a game against an unprepared opponent. And it's searchable by Dragon of Lightsworn, so now it's even easier to get a hold of. But if I can help it, I'm gonna hold off on inviting it to any other decks that I have. Absolutely rancid vibes on this one. Very judgy. That covers all of our shining soldiers. Now it's time for the denizens of the dark, the Twilightsworns. And while they work with all the previous support, they work in a slightly different way. While several of our Lightsworn cards care about a number of Lightsworns being in the grave, the Twilightsworns want to see a number of them being banished. This can sometimes cause a bit of tension between the two halves, but with proper sequencing and a bit of milling luck can actually feed into each other to make both of them better. Especially because, instead of milling during the end phase as a mandatory effect, they mill whenever another Lightsworn Monsters effect activates, making each of them additional Garroths, though these don't draw you cards, and they only work once per turn. ReonPotato, Twilightsworn Fighter, is a level 2 beast monster with 200 attack and 100 defense, and if this card is normal summoned or flipped face up, you can banish a Lightsworn monster from your hand or grave to banish a card on the field, and once per turn, mills 3 whenever another Lightsworn monster's effect is activated. This gets to be a lot more proactive than regular ReonPotato, but still maintains the ability to work like the original, though it does need that grave setup to actually work, otherwise it doesn't have a fighting chance. Lumina, Twilightsworn Shaman, is a level 3 spellcaster monster with 1000 attack and defense, and once per turn, you can banish a Lightsworn monster from your hand or grave, then target a banished Lightsworn monster, except a copy of itself, and special summon it. And once per turn, it mills you 3 if another Lightsworn monster effect is activated. This one lacks a bit more synergy with the core monsters, since we don't really have any self-banishing in theme, at least not for now. This does mean it works well with off-theme cards that do that. With the inclusion of Twilightsworns, the Chaos monsters get a lot better, and once you get at least one banished, this can summon from the grave in a similar way to how original Lumina can summon a monster from the hand. But we can no longer summon copies of itself with its own effect. How very, very sad. That's how new design does it to you. Saddles you with reasonable restrictions. How dare they? Jane, Twilightsworn General, is a level 4 warrior monster with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn, you can banish a Lightsworn monster from your hand or grave, then target a face-up monster on the field, and it loses attack and defense equal to the banished monster's level times 300 until the end of the turn. And Jane mills 2 whenever another Lightsworn monster's effect is activated. So instead of growing in power, it debuffs another monster, and I'm kinda conflicted here. On the upside, you are shrinking a monster for around 1200, but you do need to pair this with Twilightsworn Lumina if you want this to be anything but a battle trick. Like with original Jane, this is the most cuttable of the bunch unless the reduction comes up in a meaningful way, which is a shame because that sword looks so cool. I want it. Lila, Twilightsworn Enchantress, is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 1700 attack and 200 defense, and once per turn, when a spell or trap card is activated as a quick effect, you can banish a Lightsworn monster from your hand or grave, then target a face-up spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. And Lumina also mills 3 whenever another Lightsworn monster's effect is activated. So this Lila gets to remove back row while maintaining their attack position, and because it's a quick effect, this is actually effective removal against things like continuous spells, continuous trap cards, and field spell cards. It's kinda righteous, though once again isn't quite as plug and play as base Lila. But goddamn do I love the new accessories. I am a sucker for a big witch hat. Punishment Dragon is a level 8 dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2600 defense, seems familiar, that can't be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from the hand by possessing 4 or more banished Lightsworn monsters with different names. And once per turn, as a quick effect, you can pay 1000 life points to shuffle into the deck all cards in the graves and face-up banished cards, except Lightsworn monsters, and it mills 4 whenever a Lightsworn monster's effect is activated. So it's not the same kind of immediate board rending that its lighter brother has, but instead hits decks that love to stock up the grave and banished zones, which is a lot of them. It also lets you shuffle back off theme support and powerful techs, and at quick effect speed is even disruption. So don't get too comfortable with using those zones while this is active, or else you're really gonna get punished. Alright, that's all of our main deck monsters. Now it's time for the extra deck. Oh, and we're all back to being light attributes as well. Enlightenment Dragon is a level 10 dragon fusion monster with 3000 attack and defense, requiring Judgment Dragon and Punishment Dragon as material. But fret not, for polymerization is not needed. It must be special summoned from the extra deck by banishing the above cards, one each from your field and from the grave. Once per turn as a quick effect, you can pay 2000 life points to banish all other cards on the field and in the graves. Once per turn, during your end phase, send the top 4 cards of your deck to the grave, and if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can add one each of your banished Judgment Dragon and Punishment Dragons to your hand, then you can special summon both, ignoring summoning conditions. This is a pretty fantastic turn 1 option. You'll likely be getting Punishment Dragon into the grave as you fill it with Lightsworns needed to summon Judgment, and once it hits board, you've got a way to completely purge an opponent's field at quick speed. You even get to float into the originals if this gets bopped. What a nice touch. It's a nice option to have, but I wouldn't base my game plan around it. Also, I think the dragons might have gotten their color theory a little mixed up. Last I checked, black and white don't come together to make gold. Though, I'm not complaining. Michael, the Lightsworn, is a level 7 dragon synchro monster with 2600 attack and 2000 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more non-tuner light monsters as material. Once per turn, you can pay 1000 life points to target a card on the field and banish it, and when this card is destroyed, you can target any number of other Lightsworn monsters in your grave to shuffle them back into the deck, giving you 300 life points for each card shuffled, and you mill 3 cards during the end phase. This was a pretty powerful synchro monster that came packaged with the Lightsworn structure deck, and it isn't without merit, even now. A big monster that can give you free removal made for a good midpoint on the way up to Judgment Dragon, and because it triggers on destruction in general, it's not a total loss if you nuke this because of it. It even gives you cards back in your deck to help keep you stocked up for longer with some life points for your trouble, thematically rallying you for one last push to finish the fight. If Lightsworns ever get top table representation again, don't be surprised to see this putting in work again. But considering the typing is dragon, I think we all know who's responsible for that. You're doing great, Judgy. Keep it up. I'm sorry I said your vibes were rancid. Minerva, Lightsworn Athena, is a level 8 fairy synchro monster with 2800 attack and 1800 defense, requiring generic materials. While on the field, Lightsworn monsters you control can't be banished by card effects, and if this card is synchro summoned, you can send Lightsworn monsters from your deck to the graveyard with different types, up to the number of Lightsworn monsters used as material for this card's summon. And you can banish up to 4 Lightsworn monsters from your grave to send that many cards from the top of your deck to the grave. Now this is some legacy support. Pair this with Enlightenment Dragon and you can use its board wipe effect without hitting your own monsters. But if you don't, it still means you have protection from banishing removal, which is pretty tight. The more immediate impact, though, will be the mill you get on Synchro Summon, getting you at least 2 monsters, if you make it on theme. Sadly, those sent monsters have to be different types, so you can't just send Wolf and Fellas to immediately make another level 8 synchro, but since Weiss is our only fiend, it pairs well with just about anything to get us a reborn. And if that wasn't enough, it actually helps to fix the problems we had where Twilightsworn didn't mesh quite so well with our base cards, by using banishing as a way to fuel more mills. This is an incredible addition to the theme, but we have got to talk about the name here. Minerva and Athena are basically the same mythological deity, Greek and Roman cultural differences notwithstanding, not to mention that they're using a name as their title. That would be like if someone went around saying that their job was Greg. They earned money being a professional Greg. Who does that? Minerva, the Exalted Lightsworn, is a rank 4 Fairy Xyz monster with 2000 attack and 800 defense, requiring 2 level 4 monsters as material. You can detach a material to mill 3 cards, then draw cards equal to the number of Lightsworn monsters sent to the grave by this effect, making it a Garroth that lives in your extra deck. If this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave, then you can destroy cards on the field up to the number of Lightsworn monsters sent to the grave by this effect. This is Minerva during the middle of their Lightsworn journey so far, and boy do they have a story to tell. See, while this was released as part of a core set in the OCG, in the TCG this was removed from that set and was instead made a prize card for the 2015 Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series. And prize cards are a funny thing, because they are legal to play despite their small quantity, unless it has a little sticker that says otherwise, which means that if the card isn't powerful, it's not seen as a worthwhile prize unless it does a really good job in the art department. But if you make it actually good, you get another issue. The most infamous example of this is with Crush Card Virus. Well, it was a prize card. It was so powerful, so game determinative, that once someone had earned it, it would get shuffled around particular circles of high-level players, ensuring they would have access to this super powerful card to give them an edge during tournaments that other players just weren't realistically gonna have. Thankfully, Exalted Minerva was nowhere near as powerful as Crush Card, but it did mean that a very limited amount of players had access to an optimal version of a strategy that almost every other player just would never have been able to play. Thankfully, the card would get a wider release 2 years later, but it had already left its mark. And while it doesn't strike fear into the hearts and minds of duelists like it once did, this is always an option for the intrepid duelist looking to turn any 2 level 4 monsters into a grave setup, as long as they keep their eyes on the prize. Curious, the Lightsworn Dominion is a Link 3 warrior monster with 2400 attack, requiring 3 monsters with the same attribute but different types as material. If this face-up card is destroyed by a battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect while its owner controls it, you can target a card in your grave and add it to your hand. If this card is Link summoned, you can send any card from your deck to the grave, and if any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave by an effect, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave. Hey, another Lightsworn extra deck monster that got widely popular, who would have guessed? While its material requirements were strict, not having a way to use only 2 monsters, the payoffs were astronomical. Saying it's a foolish burial in the extra deck would be doing it a disservice, cause this sends any card, not just monsters, giving you a way to access any grave effect directly from your deck. And that comboed with its own mill, so you could end up tipping over even more value. The grave recursion was just icing on the cake because this card didn't have any restriction on its use as Link material itself, which made it grave setup and a rung in the Link ladder. The attribute most adept at using this though, funnily enough, was Dark, with piles containing dragons, dangers, and all manner of other goons having all the raw material needed to field this and bridge the gap between any number of engines. So it's no wonder why this card is now banned in the TCG, and shouldn't be coming back for the foreseeable future. Though, for some reason, they have kept Beatrice around, which does something similar. Curious. Alright, that's all the monsters, now it's time for the spells and traps. Charge of the Light Brigade is a normal spell card that mills you for 3 as cost to add a level 4 or lower Lightsworn monster from your deck to your hand. Enabler and starter card all wrapped into one, this is one of the theme's most famous cards. Even decks only running 1 or 2 Lightsworns would risk running this as a way to force more mills, and in the theme proper, it's fantastic, putting the right monster in your hand when you need it, which is fantastic considering our wide toolbox of effects. Lila gives us back row removal, Lumina is revival, and as of now, can grab Dragon of Lightsworn to really get us off to the races. And have you noticed that this doesn't have a once per turn clause yet? That's right. Draw multiples of these, and this can get out of control real quick. But, maybe naming your card after a famously botched military maneuver isn't the best for the team's morale, huh? March of the Dark Brigade is a normal spell card that targets a Lightsworn monster in your grave that has a level and adds it to your hand, then banishes a number of cards from the top of your deck equal to the original level of that monster in your hand. When compared to Charge, this makes for a better mid-game card, recovering powerful Lightsworns you may have lost or milled, while perhaps getting some names into your banishment for Punishment Summon and Twilight Lumina's effect. But honestly, I'm really not sold here. While recovering our cards can be nice, we do have other options, and while there are a lot of cards that benefit from being in the grave, not quite as many mesh with banishing, meaning that March isn't quite as much of an incidental enabler as Charge is. Honestly, we should probably put this to rest. No one should be subjected to a forced march. Solar Recharge is a normal spell card that has you discarding a Lightsworn monster to draw 2 cards, then mill 2 cards. Another banger of a support spell which also lacks a once per turn clause. This is one of the best archetypal draw 2 spells in the game. You get monsters in the grave to summon with Lumina, you can pitch dead wolves that have ended up in your hand, and you never know what extra cards you're gonna get off those mills. This is an outrageously powerful card, no 2 ways about it. The Lightsworns must have been drinking their Sunny D's, cause they're really out here unleashing the power of the sun. Twilight Twin Dragons is a normal spell card, and if you control Punishment Dragon, you can target a Judgment Dragon in your grave and add it to your hand, then mill 4. If this card is sent to the grave by a Lightsworn monster's effect, you can target a Punishment Dragon in your grave and add it to your hand, then banish the top 4 cards of your deck. This is one of those cards that's meant to bridge the gap between the 2 dragons so they work better together, but now we have Enlightenment Dragon. If one of those 2 are in the grave, we want it to stay in there so we can make the fusion. My advice, just put this back in the bulk box without a second thought. Lightsworn Saber is an equipped spell card that you can only equip to a Lightsworn monster. The equipped monster gains 700 attack, and when this card is sent from the deck to the grave, you can target a Lightsworn monster you control and equip it to this card. So it's a little power boost that you can pick up if it gets milled. Neat. Nothing really much to write home about here. 700 is significant, but the bar has been raised so much for equipped spells that it isn't even worth considering. Get back to me when the equipped spell mills 4 cards on activation and when the equipped monster attacks, as well as summoning a Lightsworn from grave when this hits grave. You know, just make it really obnoxious. Lightsworn Sanctuary is a continuous spell card, and once per turn, you can send a Lightsworn monster from your hand to the grave, then target one other Lightsworn monster in your grave and add it to your hand. And each time any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave, place a shine counter on this card. If any number of Lightsworn cards you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can remove 2 shine counters from your side of the field for each of those Lightsworn cards instead. This is a nifty card because Monster Reincarnation was already a pretty popular pick, and Sanctuary is a repeatable source of that. The problem is, though, that Reincarnation was so good because it could recover your off-theme options as well, so Sanctuary just doesn't hit the same niche. The protection effect was pretty nice, but was never important enough for its own sake to see widespread play, though does protect your cards from Judgment Dragon's board wipe if you have enough counters. You would just need to get all those shine counters, and with all the milling you'd have to do to actually get that amount, losing some on-field cards will be the least of your worries. Still, it does play into the deck's strengths, so I have to give it props for that. After all, every time you send a card from your deck to the grave, a Minerva gets their wings. Realm of Light is a field spell card, and each time any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave, place a shine counter on this card. All Lightsworn monsters gain 100 attack for each shine counter on this card, and if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, remove 2 shine counters from this card instead. These counters can work alongside Sanctuaries, but you'll want to touch them as little as possible, because the more counters you have, the bigger your Lightsworns get. Though, notably, it is only 100 per counter, and no matter how much any individual monster mills, you'll only ever get 1 counter for that mill. Though, if you have Sanctuary, it'll get a counter too, which means that you'll have enough counters for a single protection from Sanctuary. It's a little wild that a single mill doesn't equal 1 protection to begin with, but then I'd have to care about the mechanics of a field spell that was designed before they started actually helping you get your theme online. I wouldn't even say this could see play in the future. After all, it's the Realm of Light, not the Realm of Possibility. Lightsworn Aegis is a normal trap card that targets face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Lightsworn monsters you control and negates their effects until the end of the turn. And if this card is sent from deck to grave, you can set it. We're starting off strong here with the trap cards because this one is dope. It's an omni-negate for anything on field that you can target that scales with your setup, and if you mill it, you just get it, no questions asked. It suffers from the usual issues that trap cards have, being too slow, but the power is there, and if you mill it, then hey, it's just a little extra value. But even though it says Aegis, it's not quite a shield. It's more defensive in the you can't punch me if I take all the bones out of your arms kind of way, which is still pretty fresh. Lightsworn Judgment is a normal trap card that, when activated, is placed on top of your deck, which seems odd, but if sent from the deck to the grave by a Lightsworn monster's effect, you can add a Judgment Dragon from your deck to your hand. This was a pretty sweet pick, as it helped you get your big fluffy dragon into your hand before milling it. But with the introduction of Dragon of Lightsworn, I actually don't think you need this anymore. Which is a shame, because this is probably one of the deck's funniest pieces of art. It's totally unintentional, but I'm not really getting the menace of a divine Dragon of Light, passing judgment upon a supplicant to see if they are worthy of wielding its cosmic power. I see a big puppy dragon asking for treats. It's just adorable. Twilight Cloth is a normal trap card that targets a face-up monster you control. Banish any number of Lightsworn monsters from your grave, and if you do, that monster gains 200 attack and defense for each monster banished by this effect until the end of the turn. And if this card is sent from your deck to the grave by the effect of a Lightsworn monster, you can activate this effect. This turn, Lightsworn monsters you control can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. With the introduction of Synchro Minerva, I think we can agree that this card lacks almost any usage. The blanket archetypal protection is cool, but there's not a way to set this up so it can be used when it's actually needed. The closest thing we have is Dragon of Lightsworn, sending any Lightsworn card from deck to grave, but this is a Twilight card, so it doesn't count. The Twilightsworns may be cut from the same cloth as the Lightsworn, but in terms of card quality, they most certainly are not. Twilight Eraser is a normal trap card, and if you control 2 or more Lightsworn monsters with the same type but different names, banish 2 Lightsworn monsters from your grave, then target 2 cards on the field and banish them. And if this card is sent from the deck to the grave by a Lightsworn monster's effect, you can special summon a Lightsworn monster from your hand. This one is slightly more playable than Cloth, if only for the fact that it's basically Lightsworn Icarus attack. The same type, different name is likely a nod to having the light and dark versions of a Lightsworn teaming up for this, but Twilight Lumina and Twilight Lila are shown instead, which, I mean, technically works because they're both spellcasters. Its on-mill effect is about as unreliable as Cloth's too, as you may not even have a Lightsworn in hand to summon. That being said, there is potential here, both in terms of playability and more lore connections. 1, Dark Magic Circle was funny, 2 is just trying to send me into a frenzy. Vanquishing Light is a counter-trap card, and when any number of monsters are summoned, you can tribute a Lightsworn monster to negate the summon, and if you do, destroy those monsters. Now, this was a brutal card that helped to keep tempo in your favor. Trading out one monster to keep your opponent off an important one is a 2-for-1 trade you can make whenever you want when it's most beneficial to you, and was particularly powerful against monarchs at the time. But make no mistake, this hits any inherent summon, even the normal ones. So this gives you a firm grasp on the field as long as you have a Lightsworn to spend and your opponent doesn't have any back row removal. See, I told you Celestia had a mean streak. They're looking to play the most unfun Yu-Gi-Oh you have ever seen. Glorious Illusion is a continuous trap card that you can activate by targeting a Lightsworn monster in your grave to special summon it in face-up attack position. During each of your end phases, you mill 2, and when this card leaves the field, destroy that monster, and when that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. Yup, it's an on-theme Call of the Haunted, though on-theme is a little misleading since this is another card that's not name-stamped. But without a Lightsworn Speller Trap Searcher and no Grave synergy, it's basically a non-issue. This gets you back an on-theme member of your team with all their effects intact, and tacks on a bit more milling as a bonus. The only thing that would make this perfect is if no monster can be destroyed in battle if these summoned monster battles, which would make that a true illusion monster. Light Spiral is a continuous trap card, and each time any number of cards are sent from your deck to the grave by the effect of a Lightsworn monster, remove from play the top card of your opponent's deck. This leads to a very interesting, if totally unplayable, variant of Lightsworns, Mill. Whenever we mill, we shred a card off their deck, and because it's banished, it's not likely to have any kind of effect they can take advantage of. But retaliating with one card off the top of their deck whenever we mill 2 or 3 doesn't really keep you ahead of the curve. If anything, that difference is really going to spiral out of control. Lightsworn Barrier is a continuous trap card, and when a Lightsworn monster you control is targeted for an attack, you can mill 2 to target the attacking monster and negate that attack. So if you want to keep your weaker Lightsworn safe, there are worse options. Your opponent effectively starts dealing damage to you via your deck, which can vary in effectiveness depending on what those mills are. But while there are worse, there are certainly better. Which is a shame because this is clearly showing off Genesis' talents. They can cast Vampiric Touch, Resilient Sphere. If we could add Flame Strike to the roster, we'd be all set. Now that we've covered everything, it's time for a little combo. How about we make Enlightenment Dragon with just one card? Maybe a discard. And some luck on the mills. Look, it's Lightsworns, you have to embrace that stuff. Start things off with Charge of the Light Brigade. Once you activate it, check your mills, and if there's at least one Lightsworn monster in there, go ahead and grab Dragon of Lightsworn. Now you can special summon it, sending a Lightsworn card from your deck to the grave. The monster we're going to send is Fellas, so we can special summon it, and then sync these two together for Synchro Minerva. With Dragon's effect, grab Judgment, and with Minerva, send Weiss and Wolf from deck to grave. Wolf will summon itself, and Weiss can summon, well, that's going to depend on a few things. If you already have Punishment Dragon in your grave at this point, you can use Weiss to summon Fellas. Then use Fellas and Wolf to make whatever level 8 Synchro you want, and now you have Weiss, Wolf, Fellas, and Dragon all in grave. That's 4, and now you have enough to summon Judgment Dragon. Then banish it and the punishment in grave, and you've got your Enlightenment, with added Minerva protection. But if you don't have punishment in grave, we do have to find a way to get it in there. So it's time for cheese. With Weiss's effect, summon back Dragon of Lightsworn. Now, link Synchro Minerva and Wolf into either Crossroads Dragon or Galaxy Eyes Soul Flare Dragon. It's not really important which one, unless you're running some kind of plant or galaxy variant. The important thing is that we now have 2 dragons on board that we can use as link material to make Dragoonity Knight Romulus. This will grab us Dragon Ravine, and with that field spell and the discard we talked about at the beginning, you can send Punishment Dragon to the grave. It was a rough road, but we got there. Now, notably, if Curious was still legal, we could just link all 3 of them without going into that weird line to send a punishment, but that's for the OCG to use. Alright, so that's all the Lightsworn cards, but what do we do with them? Well, with a dwindling deck and power beyond mortal limits, we want to bring games to a close as soon as possible. We'll want to mill, kill, and drill down into our opponent's weak points, banishing and destroying everything our opponent lays claim to. We'll need to grab as many mill enablers as possible and run all the cards we can that benefit when being tossed unceremoniously into the grave. So what can we play to help them out? Well, gosh, where do we even start? If you've played the game for any period of time, you know that the grave is one of the most powerful zones in the game, so a theme that loves to put cards in there is going to attract a lot of attention, so I'm only really going to be able to focus on a few of them. The first that come to mind are two of the best types that utilize the grave: plants and zombies. While there are stronger archetypal options out there for plants nowadays when it comes to graveyard recursion and setup, back in the day, cards like Miracle Fertilizer, Giga Plant, Spore, and Glow Up Bulb all made the grave a potent compost heap to pull from, especially if something like Dandelion was still legal. Zombies, on the other hand, are a little more evergreen. Mizuki is an all-time great, acting as a reborn from grave. Milling just about any Eldritch-related card is pure value, and Balerdrock becomes one zombie world away from being one of the game's most annoying negation bodies. Heck, you can mill Necro World Banshee to get that zombie world onto the board. Definitely experiment using some Lightsworn cards in these decks if you want to spice things up a bit. Tearlaments were mentioned previously and didn't really need Lightsworns, and I stand by that, while they're at full power. The deck still has its upsides, but with 3 limited cards and a banned fusion, there's room to tech in some co-workers. Not only will milling via our Lightsworns trigger the fusion effects, the Tearlament milling will do the same for our Lightsworn grave effects. I'm not sure if there's a fusion that bridges the gap between Tearlaments and Lightsworns. If you have any, I'd love to hear them down below. I can't wait to hear some goofy options. As for other mill enablers, there is of course the classic Foolish Burial, as well as Mathematician. Needlebug Nest is a popular budget option, but avoid it if you can. While milling 5 is powerful, it lacks the speed that we're looking for. Having a bunch of cards in grave is nice, but sometimes we also need a few in hand to actually pop off. That's where Pot of Avarice comes in. Because we're milling the High Heaven, we'll more than likely have the 5 targets needed, so we can get those back into the deck to use for later and draw us 2 fresh cards. It's more vulnerable than ever thanks to the presence of DD Crow and the Bestials, but it's a chance I'm willing to take. Because we can play so well with both light and dark cards, a number of Chaos support meld with us beautifully. Chaos space can be used to grab either Judgment or Punishment Dragon while recycling them, or Wolf and Fellis, whichever floats your boat. Chaos Angel is a phenomenal option for any light and or dark deck to give us some free removal, and even gives us more incentive to play Gorgoneth, because if you can summon it via Weiss, you can pair it with any level 4 to get that Chaos Angel. And of course, we have cards like Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, which is either monster spot removal or an aggressive game ender, depending on your needs. Is there any light support we can use for our deck? Well, kinda. Beckoning Light was a big tech card because it could dump our entire hand to get back milled JDs, and any Lightsworns that were in hand would help us with that card count. But it's slow and does pigeonhole our hand. It does effectively tell our opponent exactly what we'll have in there, though we can grab back Effect Veilers and Ghost Ogres as a way to interact with our opponent, so it's not all bad. Honest was a premier threat that made any light a risky proposition to battle, but has long since fallen off in playability. Battle tricks just aren't what they used to be. While the Ishizu Millers are banned, the Ishizu Shufflers are still worth your time. Being both graveyard disruption and an ability to get back cards you wish you hadn't milled is a lot of utility that's hard to pass up. As for a silly tech pick, it's Transaction Rollback. Playing trap cards is slow, but milling them together with rollback gives you immediate access to them. Run strange silver bullets like Dimensional Barrier, the Ghost Meets Girl trap card, viruses, heck, even run that Needlebug Nest I was talking about. Want to be real funny? Run Blasting the Ruins. We can get to the activation requirements fairly easily, but if you have Transaction Rollback, you don't even have to worry about that. Give yourself all the answers you could ever want, then shuffle them back into your deck with Punishment Dragon so you can do it all over again. And are you running low on life points because of that? Run Rainbow Life! I'm sure you can crash into a few monsters to get some life point gain. Alright, that's everything I know about Lightsworns, but how does it stack up against the Nova scale? Novelty. Mill can oftentimes feel like a drawback if you're not accustomed to broader trading card game conventions. So if you look at a theme that treats it as a drawback to justify stronger card design, this looks pretty interesting. And if you do have that experience, you know that you're getting the best of both worlds. But as far as our game goes, no deck has been like this since. Sure, we have decks like Burning Abyss which encourage you to fire off controlled mills with Dante, but the constant flow of mills paired with the lurking danger of decking out just doesn't exist in any other deck outside of Stromberg. Not to mention that a deck like this does a great job of introducing how mill can help you, rather than harm you. So Lightsworns get a 5 in novelty. Objectivity. Mill is so strong in fact that Lightsworns always seem to end up as the de facto tech pick to throw cards away as soon as possible. Xyz Minerva may have been a sour spot in the game's history, but I feel like it was only an issue because of its limited quantity, and would otherwise have been just a solid option. But Curious was busted right out of the gate, and helped people get away with some heinous maneuvers, to say nothing of their variants in general. Sometimes you mill a staple spell, other times you mill 20 cards and plus into the sun, burying your opponent in a mountain of card advantage. So for its legacy and potency, Lightsworn are getting a 4 in objectivity. Versatility. While not every deck wants to see their cards get shunted into the grave, heck, not even every grave-centric deck wants that randomness, there are a lot of cards and themes that don't mind the extra company. Whether it be proactive milling and searching with Charge of the Light Brigade, to Raiden acting as both tuner and miller, Lightsworns have always found a home in a number of decks. But as archetypes have gotten more streamlined, there's been less of a need to splash these cards in to fill the gaps. So while they're highly compatible, their output hasn't quite kept up with recent design. So Lightsworns get a 3 in versatility. Awesomeness. The designers were firing on all cylinders with this one. We've got impactful effects on strong monsters, a build-around concept that's interesting and adds a lot of variety and flavor to your games, and the art direction is on point, taking animals and humans of all shapes, sizes, and everything in between, and managed to make all of them look unique and stylish while maintaining a cohesive aesthetic. When you see a Lightsworn monster, you know you're looking at a Lightsworn monster. It even expanded the multiversal aspect of them from their lore by recruiting a Dark World monster. This theme gets an easy 5 in awesomeness from me, earning Lightsworns a 17 out of 20 on the Nova scale. And that's all I have to say about Lightsworns. This has been very fun for me because when these came out in high school, I was livid. Try getting a gladiator beast through a judgment dragon when you haven't drawn your chariot. That stuff's pretty rough. But now, I can appreciate everything from the design to the playstyle. And with my love for graveyard decks, PK Fire for life by the way, I've come to enjoy them even more. From a safe distance. Look, Lightsworns are cool, but Michael also looks like the kind of guy that has way too much to say about prayer in schools, if you catch my drift. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Lightsworns the beacon of a new age of dueling, or have they reached their twilight years? And which one's your favorite? Honestly, I'm surprised to say, it's Raikou. They're just iconic. Let me know your favorite down below, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by my patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Sir Knight JCB and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, Emily Chan, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, That One Dumbass and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Callum McCann, Jazz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat, the true Draco Slayer, Inblink, Jester Designs, Jordan Vick, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yugioh, Kim Smiley Face, Lemon Yugioh, Lord Whoop-de-Doo, Manga Pages, Marluxia's a Girl, Matt Simmons, McSpoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Misty, Nitromo, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, the legendary Raven, and Zal Dreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you want to see another deck that loves to peel cards from the top of the deck, make sure to check out this video where I cover Burning Abyss. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.